Welcome, everybody, and to those of you that are listening on a recording. This was recorded on June 25th, and it's a pleasure to be with you all. Today, we're going to focus on opening the sales call, and quite honestly, we're going to spend about an hour talking about what happens in less than 1 minute. As a matter of fact, when we time it in class, very frequently, it takes less than 35 seconds to accomplish. So we're going to kind of walk through the methodology, why that takes place, and where it takes place in the course of a meeting. The curriculum that I'm used to providing people is a statistically based approach that has been reviewed for 50 years. Successful sales calls are monitored, and less successful sales calls are monitored, and a determination is made as to what worked and what was less effective on sales calls. The model that we teach is the professional selling system, and it has basically 4 steps. It's a need satisfaction selling program that starts with the opening, which is where our focus is going to be today, probing, where we gather information, transition, where we take the information that we have learned and introduce how our company, our product will be able to help the customer achieve what they're looking to. And then finally, the closing. It's actually a parallel skill to opening. We do exactly the same things in the closing step that we are going to learn today in the opening step. We have the same 4 criteria. And when you get a broader look at the whole program, you'll gain an understanding of what that is all about, where it comes from. The purpose of the whole sales call is to make informed, mutually beneficial decisions with the customer, with the prospect, with the client, whoever you are dealing with. The thing that I'd like you to think about right now is a sales call that you are about to make. Maybe this is a call that you've been planning for some time. Maybe it's a call that not a lot of thought has gone into. But I'd like you to think right now about what your objective is for that call. What would you like to accomplish on that sales call with your customer? Another way of putting this is determining ahead of time what the compelling event is that's going to drive that customer to want to spend money. Now, if your customer is not the one that dips into their personal pocket to pay the bill, what is the compelling event that's going to drive that individual to go to the CFO and ask them for $35,000 or $100,000 or whatever the value is that will be transferred to you when they purchase a product? So it will help you right now to plan. If you look at a customer that you might be calling on in the next week or so and ask yourself the question, what is my sales call objective? What do I want to achieve? And now we want to really consider that current prospect. We want to focus on what will make a sales call on that prospect more successful. By that, I simply mean stop selling, start helping. How will you make a sales call on a customer and help them? Ask yourself, who is that customer and what is the goal that I want to accomplish? That's going to help you define what your objective is for the sales call. Now, for the balance of our program, I want you to keep that objective in your mind. And I want you to think about now a definition. All situations where we interact with other people have what I call our circumstances. The definition that I use for circumstances is that these are just simply factors that take place in that customer's world. It could be their feelings, it could be their opinions, but it's what are all the elements and what are the effects? It's very easy for us to look at the situation the customer is embroiled in or is facing and say, wow, they need our product. Well, the reality is our greatest competitor is the status quo. What customers do today is the obstacle that we all need to overcome. So when we look at circumstances, it does not necessarily mean that the customer wants to fix the problem that we might see. Now, the next definition I want to share with you is an opportunity. An opportunity is the potential that your organization can improve or bring about improved results for this prospect or this customer. Opportunity is potential. So if you're making notes, I want you to take and circle the word potential, because I'm going to come back to this in a little bit. Just because we see circumstances or we see the potential that our product will help the customer, it doesn't mean the customer wants to be helped in the way that we recommend they might be helped. So we've got the circumstance, we've got the opportunity. Now, I want to remind you about some simple definitions that we all learned in our early sales training, and that's very simply, all of our products have features, which are characteristics that tell the customer. Features tell, and benefits sell. Benefits are the value to the customer that the feature brings to that customer. So, characteristics that tell are features. Value are the benefits. Now, I'm going to come to the definition of a need, because I said this whole curriculum, and any sales program for that matter, focuses on need satisfaction. Need satisfaction is the desire to improve or impress results on an organization. We want to achieve impressive results. Now, that's just not an average return, it's an extraordinary return. So, the definition of a need is a desire to improve or accomplish something. Now, I'm going to go back to the definition that we had earlier about opportunity. Opportunity is the potential that the sales pros organization can improve or bring about an improved result for the customer. But a need is that we actually create in the customer's mind a desire to have what they don't currently have. So I want to impress upon you that as we plan to open the sales call, we are always focusing on, is this an opportunity or is this a need? Now, an opportunity is potential and a need is desire. So right now, I want you to think about your own life right now. And I want you to think about something that you desire. Something that you desire. What is it that you have a passion for? What is it that you have a desire for? Now, this is not the potential that you have it. It is a burning desire to change something in your life and move in a direction of having what you want. Now, this could be simply a dinner to nourish yourself. It could be a new stereo system. It could be a new automobile, a boat, a camp, a cottage, a hot tub, whatever you desire demonstrates a distinction between the potential or the opportunity. Now, I want to give you a background story, and some of you that have participated in my classes know how affectionately I feel about the marshmallow. Now, you might be kind of smiling at this point, marshmallows? There was a study done in the 1960s at Stanford University where they took 600 4-year-olds into a classroom laboratory, and a teacher came to each student and said, Johnny, Susie, I have a marshmallow for you. I'm going to put it on the plate here. I need to leave the room. Now, while I'm gone, if you would like, you can eat the marshmallow. Or, if you leave the marshmallow on the plate, what I will do is give you an extra marshmallow when I come back in the room. So you can actually eat 2 marshmallows. Well, Johnny, Susie, and all of the 600 kids contemplated whether they would leave the marshmallow on the plate. Now, we know that about 8% of the kids left the marshmallow on the plate. 1% of the kids did not like marshmallows, and the balance of 91% loved marshmallows. And as a matter of fact, before the door closed as the teacher went out, that marshmallow was in their mouth and they swallowed it. Now, that's not to say that the 8% of the kids that liked marshmallows and waited to eat the second marshmallow or to get the second marshmallow didn't lick the marshmallow or taste the marshmallow. They just saw to it that the marshmallow was put back on the plate. Now, the message that I want to get across to you before I tell you the rest of the story is, just because the salesperson sees an opportunity, it doesn't mean that the prospect or customer automatically has a need. Now, all of this ties back to that first 30 seconds, to that first minute on the sales call. We need to remember that we cannot assume that a customer has a need for our product just because we see the circumstances that are similar to other circumstances where customers have purchased our product. So one more time, just because the salesperson sees an opportunity, it doesn't mean that the customer automatically has a need. So we have to remember to be like that 8% of the kids that left the marshmallow on the plate. They delayed their gratification because they decided, if I leave it on the plate, I'll get more. Now, I want to tell you the rest of the story as the marshmallow study goes. They looked at as many of those 4-year-olds, when they got to the point where they took their SAT exams, and they looked at the correlation between the students that ate the marshmallow right away and the ones that left the marshmallow on the plate. And amazingly, they discovered that the SAT scores for the kids that had left the marshmallow on the plate were on average 200 points higher than the kids that ate the marshmallow right away. Now, if we were in class, we'd talk about this a little bit, and we'd come up with some of the reasons that that might have happened. But the summary of it is that by 4 years old, kids had learned to delay their gratification in order to get more in the end. Curiously, salespeople are the same way. If we come in and rush to judgment, and during those opening minutes assume the sale or assume the customer is going to buy our product without the customer discovering themselves that they have a compelling event, then we're playing with dangerous territory. You see, what we know is that if you have a well-crafted opening to your sales call, it is probably the singular most area to improve the results on sales calls. And we know through 50 years of analysis of thousands of sales calls every year during that 50 years that are run through independent statistical organizations, that you will improve the outcome of your sales calls by 27% over salespeople who do not. Now, sadly, we also know that only about 8.7% of the salespeople that are watched on sales calls use step number 1. So they throw away the ones that do not use step number 1. They throw all but 27% improvement away on a sales call. So I'll get to what that first step is in a moment, but I want you to remember, will you be in that 8% that uses this critical step along with the other 3 steps, because there are 4 steps in the opening, or will you leave it on the side of the road? The goal of opening is to agree on what's going to be covered or accomplished during the course of the sales call. I don't care if you're selling a large product, an expensive product, or a trinket over the counter. If you and the customer agree on what's going to be covered in the opening minute of the sales call, it will guide the success of the sales call. The question I ask you rhetorically, I want you to think about this, is why is it important to determine with the customer what's going to be covered or accomplished on the call? I want you to think about that for a moment. And if you're taking notes, ask yourself this question. Why is it important for you and the customer to agree on what's going to be covered during the call? Just jot down some notes to yourself. All right, that's probably good. Opening takes place when you as the salesperson and the customer are ready to conduct business. Now, I have not covered in the opening everything that happens prior to us getting down to business. So I'm not referring to what happened in the football game. I'm not referring to what happened in the weather. I'm not referring to a previous purchase or a challenge that the customer might be facing with something they have in their life. I'm talking about we are now face to face. We're ready to get down to business. We've got all the small talk done, but now we're focused on really getting to the heart of why we're here today. Now, the first step is called positioning. Positioning. Positioning is simply where we talk about how today's call came about. For example, I might say in our last meeting, we indicated that today we would be looking at a proposal. Or in our phone call, you indicated that you were facing some challenges with X. Or when I met you at the trade show, you said such and such and such. Or I received a telephone call from one of the folks in your operation that thought it would be valuable for us to get together to chat. Remind the customer about why you're face-to-face with them. Now, you may say to me, hey, Jim, I called and made an appointment. Why do I have to remind them about how the call came about? Well, it's very simply this, folks. When you came to that office or you called them on the phone, they were busy doing something else. The positioning statement is a buffer. It is a bridge. It allows you and the customer to transition from what you were doing to the very important work that you're going to accomplish together. So positioning is like leaving the marshmallow on the plate. It's not rushing to judgment. It's not getting down to business. It's not telling your story. You know, the affectionate term that some people use with me is the show up and throw up phase. This is about impacting the outcome of the overall sales call. So here are some notes for you. And incidentally, no need to copy these notes down. I will be sending each one of you a copy of this recorded presentation. If by chance you're calling on the phone and you have not left an email with me, just send me an email. I'll see to it that you get a copy of the recording. But positioning your opening relates back to how the call came about. And less than 9% of salespeople will use this. Now, many people have noticed that it's interesting that there is a correlation between the 8% of the kids that left the marshmallow on the plate to get more and the 8.7% that actually use the first step. If you don't use this first step, you're going to reduce your chances by up to 27%. So it's sad that very few salespeople will learn to use this step. And honestly, I just think it's silly or it's stupid because we know statistically through measuring thousands of sales calls that this improves the outcome of the calls. Now, what positioning does is it reminds that prospect of how you met, how the call came about, and it gets their attention off of what they were doing onto what business is at hand. So now, think about a call you're going to make this week. And very quickly in your mind or in your notes, write yourself a positioning statement. So I'll be making a call on to Steve at 5 o'clock today. And in our last meeting, Steve and I talked about the challenge that his sales organization is facing, not meeting the forecast that they submit to the CFO, who in turn submits it to the board, who in turn publishes it to the shareholders. So the challenge is, how do they produce a forecast that is more accurate? And I know that my solution is to introduce Sales Pro PSS and a coaching module that we help them meet or exceed their forecast by almost twice what they currently do. But that's not what I rush into. My positioning statement is, Steve, when we last met, you indicated that you were facing a challenge in the production of an accurate forecast of what's going to actually close. Now, I'm not putting this in the form of a question. I'm simply stating the reality of what Steve told me in our last meeting. You will at that point remind people about how today's call came about. Now, if you're just in the area and you stopped by, be honest with the customer. Frequently, I will be traveling. I'll finish a customer meeting. I'll still have an hour or so before I need to drive to the airport. I may stop in and I may say, hi, my name is Jim Ullery. I was working with one of the neighbors. I don't ordinarily make calls like this, but I saw your business. I thought it would be interesting to learn what you do, make, or sell here. Leave my business card, and if possible, secure the card of the president of the company so that I might reach out to him or her at a later time. So my positioning statement is an honest representation that I have not talked with them before, that I simply was in the neighborhood. Okay, step number 2 after positioning is propose an agenda. Now, in the proposing of the agenda, we want the prospect or the customer to be involved. During the process of developing the agenda, it's a good idea to confirm the amount of time you have or focus on the amount of time. Many of my pharma clients or people calling on dentists, they have very limited amounts of time that a doctor will give them. So if it is only an honest 5 to 10 minutes, then by gosh, I understand we only have 5 to 10 minutes. This is what we'd like to cover in our time together today. Is there anything else that would be important for you, doctor, or for the customer, whatever the case might be? I am going to push the client's ideas to the top of my agenda. I want to encourage the customer to give me items that will be included on the agenda. And obviously, I want to come to those first because that's the most important thing to the customer. I don't start to cover the issue, at this point in the agenda creation or at this point in the opening. So if the customer says, well, I'm very interested in your XYZ product, don't jump on that. You haven't finished the opening. So propose the agenda. And here's what I want you to do in your notes. What would a typical agenda look like? Think about that meeting that you'll have this coming week. What do you typically do on a sales call? Well, you might ask questions. You might share some examples. You might share some testimonials. You might ask more questions. What are the things that could happen on the sales call? Because what you want to have happen is you and the customer come to agreement on what's going to happen today. Now, I grant you, most of the hard work is going to be done by yourself in planning the meeting. Most customers have not thought ahead of time about the things they would like to accomplish in a meeting with you. So be mindful that you may have to help the customer to give you input on what the agenda looks like, but create a very simple agenda. Keep in mind, all of this is still happening within that first minute of the sales call. So first step is positioning. Second step is the agenda. Now the third step in the opening. And this is why I said before that you do not want to rush ahead on something the customer said they wanted to cover. Yes, they're interested, but no, you don't want to jump in to begin to cover that because you have not done the value statement yet. And that would be tantamount to taking the marshmallow off the plate, putting it in your mouth, and chewing it and swallowing it. You've got to leave that marshmallow on the plate. The third step is very simply this. You're going to state the value of the agenda that you just co-created with the customer. Say that again. It is the value of the agenda that we just created together. And we're going to tie it into that meeting objective that you and I talked about at the very beginning of the call. Remember, I said to you, think about what your objective is on this call. Think about what the compelling event is that will drive this customer to want to spend money. I want you to think about when you close this sale, whether it's today or 18 months from today or 1 month from today, where will that customer be in their thinking? What will your predetermined close be? Research has shown that if you include a value statement, it dramatically increases the successful outcome of a sales call. As a matter of fact, and this is where in class I usually pull on my bow tie and I say to folks, I personally believe that the sale is made when I present the value statement to the customer. So I may say to the customer, by the end of our meeting today, you'll have all the information necessary to determine how and when you'll move forward with our sales training and coaching program. So the focus here is we want to include in the value statement what the successful outcome is going to look like, and then the customer will understand up front what value you're going to bring to that organization. I want to give you some examples of this because I know a lot of people have challenges as it relates to the value of the agenda. That way, we'll each have the information necessary to move forward to the next step. We'll be able to work together at that point in the determination of next steps on the project. With this agenda, we'll be in a position to see the value of all of our options for moving forward and compress implementation time of your program. Now, this is somewhat an example, but this is my email. My desire is to help you. So if you would like to develop some value statements for yourself and you just want to check them with me, feel free to send me an email. Now, you may do this later on when you're watching the tape. You may want to do the whole opening. My time is yours. I'm here to help you become extraordinary at opening the sales calls, doing the full sales call. If I can help you in crafting a strong value statement, please don't hesitate to use me in that endeavor. So what have we got so far? We've got the positioning, we've got the co-created agenda, we have the value statement. Now I want to talk about the fourth and final step, and that is checking for acceptance. Checking for acceptance is very simply this. We've presented an agenda, we've presented the value of that agenda. Keep in mind, it is not the value of the product. It's not the value of the service. It's the value of the agenda and the value that we will bring that organization, that company. So 4 steps: positioning, agenda, value of the agenda, and checking for acceptance. These are the same 4 steps that we'll cover in the closing. But what this does is it sets the expectation for the customer that what we talked about in the opening is what we're accomplishing in the closing. So it comes as no surprise when I take the formulated value statement and I say in the opening, by the end of the meeting today, you'll have all the information necessary to move forward and make a decision. It comes as no surprise in the closing when I say, as I indicated at the beginning of our meeting today, my objective today was to cover all of the issues that would be important to you in moving forward with a decision to use our product. They have heard this at the beginning of the sales call, or they heard it on every subsequent process continued call that you have made. So let's take a look at the condensed version of the opening. Number 1, it's to agree on what's going to be covered or accomplished during the call. You and the customer do that when you're ready to conduct business. You've had all the small talk, you've set that aside. You position your opening by relating back to how the meeting came about, whether it was the last phone call or the last meeting. You propose an agenda, you involve the prospect in the development of the agenda, you confirm the amount of time that you have. Now you state the value of the agenda. The agenda that you just created together, you tie it into the meeting objective, and you ask yourself, what will the predetermined close be? Now, usually we know what the predetermined close is because they're all very similar to sales calls that we've done in the past. And then finally, we check for acceptance, not for checking for acceptance on the purchase, but checking for acceptance on a minor point. That's the agenda. What is it that we want to agree to as far as the agenda is concerned? And once again, I'll give you a full example of an opening. And thinking about our visit today, I reflected on our recent meeting at the trade show and our conversation at the booth. You mentioned that you were facing some major changes in your manufacturing process. To best use the limited time together, 45 minutes, is that correct? It seems appropriate to create an agenda for our visit. I'd appreciate your sharing with me in more detail the changes you're anticipating. Hearing the historical perspective will help me as well. Would you like to add anything? Now be careful at this point. Don't let the customer begin to answer the questions that you have proposed that you're going to cover in the meeting. That's for the meeting. Right now, you want to get the agenda taken care of. That will allow me to compare your situation to that of companies like yours around the world that have done business with us. The value of our covering this together is by the end of our meeting today, you'll have all of the information to move forward to the next logical step. Does that sound like an appropriate way for us to spend the next 45 minutes? Customer says, yes, it does. Or they go back and modify the agenda, but inside of a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, on very complicated meetings, it may be 5 minutes. I have a client that goes back and forth to Japan. They begin to do the opening creation or the agenda creation a month in advance of his trip to Japan. When he goes to Japan, they review the agenda that they've crafted together over the course of the month ahead of time. Every customer is going to be different, but the summary of what happens in the opening is going to take about a minute. What we are looking for is we're looking for the customer words that sound like this. I want, I need, I've got to have, we have to change, we must, our objective is, I wish. It's important for us to. We're looking for a way. Our goal is to. We're trying to. I hope to be able to. We would like to. We have to change the way we. Now, every one of these statements is a statement of need on the part of the customer. What we are anxious to gather from the customer is an understanding of what their circumstances are, help them determine what those circumstances are causing for them from the standpoint of problems or dissatisfactions or things that we could help them alleviate so that they don't have these issues in the future. They don't have these problems when they go forward. So here's what I'd like to do. I've been doing too much talking. I'm going to unmute everyone. We'll see what the background situation is. You'll be given the option of unmuting or not. But I want to open it up to your thoughts, your questions, and you'll find that there is a button that says raise your hand. I will either do that or call on you, but don't be shy. If you have a question or you have a comment, just the floor is yours. Go ahead, share your question, and I'll take it from there.
Jim, can you hear me?
I can.
Sorry, I'm not seeing the raise your hand button.
I'm not either. I got to look around for it. The controls on this are a little bit crazy, but go right ahead.
Okay, this is Moira. I attended one of your seminars several years ago. I just have a question. A lot of the people with whom I work are healthcare professionals in hospitals, buzzing around seeing patients most of the day. And so my method of communication with them often is via email.
Right.
Until such time as I get the appointment set up. And as you mentioned, the Japan example, I think oftentimes we will go back and forth and set the agenda. And do you think it works equally as well by phone, in person, via email? I sometimes wonder if I do too much by email and maybe could be a little bit more effective if it was by phone.
Well, here's the thing that is happening today. You know, we're all in the midst of technological changes. And I even have customers now that are telling me more and more they're not using email, but they're texting. And they're developing their agendas on text back and forth with the customer. So I think we're going to continue to have this learning curve of what's acceptable to what customers. This kind of meeting has become a sales tool. I'm surprised at how many clients I have, particularly in the financial services area, who used to depend 100% of the time on being face-to-face with customers, but they're now setting up Zoom meetings and working with customers. They're developing agendas ahead of time by text because I think it lends itself a little bit more to the cell phone carrying population. Less and less people are in front of their computers, and they're doing it while they're on an elevator, they're doing it while they're on a subway. So you raise an excellent point, and I think for us as salespeople, we need to become adaptable to the desires of any one of our customers and fill in that way. I applaud what you're doing. I think that it can be done on the phone effectively. It can be done on email. It can be done on texting. I love to be a student of other salespeople and see what has worked for them and what has not worked.
Mm-hmm.
I have a very high regard for what's happening for me on LinkedIn of late. Time was I was on LinkedIn and you'd never get a reply from somebody, but it goes. I'm hardly going a week without getting a lead or two from my LinkedIn connections.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Excellent question. Excellent question.
Thank you. So yeah, just be adaptable, I guess, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But I would insist that these 4 steps, the closer you adhere to the 4 steps, ultimately, the more successful we're going to be. Now, The reality is what you're doing is you're co-creating the agenda before you're face-to-face with them, or before you're doing a Zoom meeting with them, or before you're on the phone with them. What I would still do in that 30 seconds as you begin the call is go through the 4 steps.
Mm-hmm. Regardless of the medium. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Anyone else? Donna Redmond, it's so good to see you on the list here.
Great to be in this seminar. Thank you, Jim.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Been a long time. And for those of you that are, I want to use the word shy and don't want to talk in front of a group, I encourage you, reach out to me. I would be more than happy the balance of the afternoon to answer questions. One of the things I will be sending to you shortly is I have subscribed to vCita, which is an appointment calendar, and you will always have the opportunity to select a time that I'm available to do a 15-minute coaching session. I don't charge for these at all. You know, my desire is to help salespeople on an ongoing basis. If it ever results in you're doing a referral for me, I thank you for that. If you ever want to write something nice on my LinkedIn profile, please do that. But make yourself welcome at any time to reach out to me on CVita when I send that out to you. It's just an appointment calendar. But in the meantime, you certainly can email me at that email I gave you before. And as I indicated, all of you will be getting a copy of today's presentation. Unless we have a burning desire for anyone else to share, I'm going to cut this off early, let you folks get back to your day. Any other questions? Thank you so much, everybody. It was a pleasure to be here and share with you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Bye-bye now.